Hello everybody, it's Stephen and Walter here for So Chatty, Episode 2. As you know, in the first episode we talked in general about buying a sewing machine, and what we thought we'd do over the next few episodes is talk specifically about machines that we own. And the reason we're talking about the machines we own is because they're the machines we're most familiar with, and we can tell you from our point of view as users what we like and what we don't like, or what we think could be improved on these machines. Now, the machine we're going to start with today is Walter's machine. It's the 6700P, the Janome 6700P, and this is a great machine overall for doing almost anything. It does have quilters in mind, and we'll talk about those features later on, but it's great for people who want to do general sewing or garment sewing, and Walter's going to look at it from the point of view of garment sewing. And we're also going to talk a little bit about cleaning and oiling your machine as well today. So we're coming back to that in a moment. I just have to readjust the camera so you can see the machine. Okay, so Walter's going to show us everything that he knows about this machine, and this is the 6700P. And so let's just talk about the 6700P, its basic features and what it comes with, and I'll have you point them out here. We should probably turn the machine on.
Yeah, we will turn it. There's a button on the side to turn it on. You just turn it on. And it does have a display, but it's not a touch screen. All your all your controlling features are on these buttons here, but it will display on the screen.
Okay, so it does not have a computer. Well, it is computerized, but it's not.
It's not a touch screen.
It's not a touch screen. So, okay.
Okay, so I sort of inherited this machine because Steve originally bought it for his initial quilting ventures into quilting. And this machine is actually was set up as a quilter style machine to be used for both sewing and quilting. And the reason for that is it has a lot of quilting feet that comes with the machine. And it's actually a pretty robust machine. It has both it has quilting advantages and it has sewing advantages. The one thing that this machine doesn't have is what they call a free arm, and it comes with this table, right? This what do you call it? What do you call it? Extended table. But I personally don't like to use the extended table, because for some reason I like sewing on the smaller pad. So I take this off, and this is my sewing area here. I don't have any kind of free arm, but so far I have not yet run into any kind of problems not using the free arm. So I'm just taking off the extended table because that's what I'm used to using. So this is just the machine. It looks, Janome has another machine that looks very similar to this, except it's red at the top. And what it is it doesn't have any of the quilting features that this machine has. So it's just a straight sewing machine. So it's a little cheaper than this machine. But essentially I think it's pretty much the same machine. It just doesn't have any of the quilting features to it.
Okay, and just before you move on with that, one of the main quilting features on this is the size of the throat. This throat, how big is this throat?
I believe it's 11 inches.
Yeah, and that's pretty big. And for those of you that are quilters, you would find this nice to have, because you're pushing through a lot of fabric through that hole. And so the bigger the hole, the easier it is to push the fabric through.
The other feature that this has, which is probably one of the reasons why there's a big difference in price between it and the 6650, is in behind they have a mechanism called AccuFeed, what the Janome has called AccuFeed. Each manufacturer has their own version of this, but what it is it's an integrated walking foot. So your walking foot, a lot of walking foots you can get a walking foot on a regular machine, but it's not integrated into the mechanism like this one is. So it gives you a really accurate walking foot feature on it.
Now, just show us this is not set up at the moment for the AccuFeed foot.
No, so this is the walking foot that comes with this machine, and what it would do is, if I put it on, is it hooks into a spot. This hooks into the spot at the back of the machine, and it's what controls the walking foot feature. And this is what they call the AccuFeed mechanism. Now on the 6650, which looks very similar to that, that mechanism isn't in there.
Okay, but let's back up for just a second we're talking about this AccuFeed and we're talking about walking foot. And you can get a walking foot for almost any sewing machine as an optional accessory. This is a little special because of the way it hooks up and it operates. You notice that there is a hook right there. And if you look at the foot itself, can you put it so we can see the foot, please? There is actually what's considered a feed dog-like mechanism that goes up and down. That's the part that Walter's pushing at the top, is making that part go up and down. And so what's happening is your fabric is not only pulled through the machine by the feed dogs, but also by these upper set of feet. So your fabric pulls through your machine much more evenly, especially when you're doing layers of fabric. If you're a quilter, for example, then it will pull your bottom layer, your batting, and your top layer through at the same time. So you have less chance of getting tucks and of having thread nests as well. So that's the difference between an AccuFeed walking foot and an ordinary walking foot, and that's something that makes this system unique.
Now, a lot of people might think, okay, I don't really need this. I just need to sew clothes. I don't really need to quilt, right? But I'm glad I have this because I primarily sew clothes, and it's when I'm working with stretchy material. What happens if I have 2 layers of stretchy material? If I don't have this, I use the walking foot on stretchy material because it will feed the top layer and the bottom layer evenly on stretchy material. And if I use a regular foot, the bottom gets pulled and stretches the fabric, and the top part doesn't get pulled, and it stays a little bit less stretched. So you end up getting puckers when you use a regular sewing mechanism when you're using stretchy fabric. So I like using the walking foot when I'm sewing stretchy fabric like jersey or stretch cotton twill or something like that. That's when I like using a walking foot. So actually it's a bonus, and actually if I were to buy another machine, I would buy one that has this integrated feature in it.
Okay, so that's what the AccuFeed is all about, and the walking foot mechanism. So what else about this machine are some features that stand out?
Well, I mean, a lot of people look at how many stitches a machine has, and a lot of people say, well, I don't need a lot of stitches. But this machine has I think, approximately 200 stitches, and these are all the stitches. Plus, it has all these alphabet sets on the bottom. And a lot of people say, well, I don't need all these stitches. And you're correct, probably. They're decorative stitches, but I've used them a fair bit. And when I make my bags, I do a rim of decorative stitching on the edge of the bags and stuff like that. So I like having those extra stitches. But the other thing that's an advantage, the more stitches you have, you also have other features like your numbers of buttonholes are bigger. Your choices for buttonholes you have more choices of buttonholes, which you have all here. It gives you a variety of other stitches that you may actually end up using that you don't think that you necessarily need to use. Plus, your widths on your zigzag stitches can vary. And this machine has a 9mm width stitch, maximum stitch, so your needle can move up to 9mm back and forth, depending on what you require. And I tend to move the needle quite frequently when I'm doing seams. Sometimes I need the needle over further than other times to get an accurate seam.
Now, just before you go on, that card that you were showing us with all the stitches and that comes with the machine, right?
Yes, it comes with the machine, and it's designed to sit on top, but I don't usually have it there because I find it's a distraction. That's the only thing I don't like about this machine, is I don't like that this card is separate. But I don't go to it very often to look at. If I need a new stitch, I keep it handy somewhere so that I got I've got it in a spot where I can just grab it quick and have a look at it.
Okay, so other features. So it's got a lot of decorative stitches for those of you that want a lot of decorative stitches. And of course it has all the standard stitches, and it's got buttonhole features. Just before we move on from that, the buttonhole feature, it comes with a device that allows you to sew your buttons onto a garment, but also if you're making buttonholes, it's really easy. It's the automatic buttonholer, and Walter's got it here. He'll show it to you.
I've got, this is the automatic buttonholer. You just put a button, as you can see right now, I've got a button in here, right, that I used for my shirt, and it will adjust your buttonhole to the size of that button for that button.
So this might be something that some of you might be interested in seeing how it works. We won't show that today because that's not part of our focus today, but that might be, if there's enough people say they would like to actually see that in operation, we can do an episode where we show that. And where are you going? You've got a microphone on.
I recently did this shirt. I haven't put the buttons on it yet. The actual buttons on it, but I did a number of buttonholes using that buttonholer.
And it makes your life a lot easier with the buttonholer. Plus, I don't sew garments, but I have used the buttonholer for things on bags or for decorative features and other things. I've even used it with some craft projects that aren't really technically related to quilting or sewing in general. So it's a nice feature to have. It makes sewing a button onto your shirt too a lot nicer. If you're like me, I don't like to hand sew, so it's very easy with the machine.
Some other features of this machine, a lot of new machines come with these features, and the upper models have similar features. And you have a stop-start button, so you can actually operate this machine without a foot pedal. And it has a speed adjustment, so that's your maximum stitching speed will be there. No matter how far your foot pedal gets depressed, it won't go any faster than what your top speed's going to be for the adjustable speed. And we have a little scissors thing here, is when you get to the end of a sewing row, you can press that and it automatically cuts your thread for you. This is an up and down needle position. You can just move the needle up and down using that button. This is where it does an automatic tie off at the end of your stitching line. And this is a reverse button so that you can reverse the feed dogs to feed forward or feed backward after going forward.
So what are some of these buttons on this side for?
These, I don't know what some of them are because I don't use them. But anyway, this is a mode button which changes your mode from, if you look at your stitches on this thing, you have a mode 1. It's in mode 1 right now. So these are all your stitches for mode 1. And if you switch to mode 2, these are all your stitches for mode 2. And each stitch has a number. So you just dial in the number, you just key in the number in the keypad, and it brings up that stitch. So if I wanted to go to a buttonhole, which I know is 23, I have to go to mode 2, and I type in 23. And it brings up the buttonholer attachment, and it shows me the buttonhole. And then I can adjust the buttonhole width, the width of the sewing, plus the density of the stitches by using these knobs. So I often go down and use 3 for the buttonhole, and I use a smaller density for the stitching for this buttonhole to give me the desired effect on the buttonhole.
Now, of course, with this machine and all these buttons that are on here, you do need your manual because there are more features here than the average person would probably use. You'll find your favorites, you'll know how to use them, but it's nice to every now and then review your manual because there's some things you may not realize that the machine will do.
Like this is your button to wind a bobbin, for instance. You have to put the bobbin in the bobbin winding mechanism and engage the winder, and it will wind a bobbin for you.
And with this machine as well, now I might get my machines mixed up. Can you wind a bobbin at the same time as you're sewing?
Yes, you can.
That's what
it has two motors in it, one for dedicated for sewing and one dedicated for winding a bobbin.
And you'll notice that on the back of this machine, it has a thread stand, so that will hold two spools of thread. So one could be winding the bobbin, and the other could be continuing with your sewing.
This machine doesn't have a sideways
a horizontal,
thread,
you mean?
Yeah, a horizontal thread holder. It just has a vertical thread holder for this particular machine.
Which is not really, I've not found that to ever be a problem. But depending on how your thread is wound on a spool, you might run into a problem where it might get tangled underneath on the thread stand. But it comes with accessories, with nets that you can put over top of your thread, and that will keep the thread coming out in a steady pace. Again, something like your manual would tell you that. And that would only be if you had maybe a specialty thread where you might need to use that. In fact, I don't think I've ever used the nets.
I've never used the nets. I've always had no problem with it feeding the thread off the spool.
But I use mostly Aurifil threads.
Which is what I have here. I haven't actually threaded this machine. I need to rethread it.
Well, after we talk about the features, we want to see you sew a little piece, a little sewing thing, so you'll have to thread it.
Another thing that this machine comes through with is a needle threader, which assists you in threading a needle. And
in here tight for that. There it is.
And it helps you. I've got some fuzz in here, but it helps you thread a needle. It comes with a number of accessory feet that are for quilting and for sewing, standard feet that it comes with. I have actually a quilting foot in there right now. It comes with it because, and it's what they call a 1/4-inch seam foot. And quilters will use it to get a 1/4-inch seam. However, I use it on garments a lot to give me a perfect 3/8 inch seam.
Oh, so that's where being able to adjust the placement of your needle comes in handy, because if you want to do a 3/8, that edge guide is set up for a 1/4 inch.
Well, no, it isn't. If you put in this edge guide with the needles in the center position, it gives you a 3/8 inch.
Oh, is that a 3/8?
Right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But if I want to put it into a 1/4 inch, I got to go back to mode 1. If I go to a 1/4 inch, I just push the button and it brings it down to a 1/4 inch.
Okay. The reason I wasn't sure of that is because I've never sewn with a 3/8 inch of a seam, because I don't do garments. And that's something that's more common to garment sewing than it is to quilting. Quilting's all 1/4 inch. Okay, so we've talked about the, and I'm going to call it a semi-automatic needle threader, because you do have to push down that lever. And when you thread this machine, we'll show you how that works in a moment. But what other features make this machine, well, desirable for garment making, since you're the garment maker?
It just stitches really well. It has a number of feet that help me guide. I use this foot a lot for even for top stitching and things like that, because I use the guide to help my stitches stay straight.
Now it comes with different foot plates too, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. This particular machine has 3 foot plates. It has this foot plate, which is, I don't know which one that is. That's the one that allows me to put the needle from side to side.
That's the zigzag. They sometimes call that the zigzag plate.
Yeah, I tend to use that one for most of my sewing.
And that's the one you would also use for decorative stitching.
There is I believe that's is that a straight needle stitch plate? That's the HP.
That's the HP, the high performance plate.
There is this machine was designed to be like what is part of their professional series for Janome. And it's supposed to be the closest thing to an industrial machine for the domestic market. So it gives you an HP foot presser plate, which is designed for professional foot.
Which confuses me, because my machine has this too, and I never use the HP system on it. And that is something I'd have to explore a little further to really understand where the benefits of that are, because I have watched some YouTube videos about it, and quite frankly, for my sewing, I don't find it as any great advantage. But as Walter said, it's designed for more professional sewers, so maybe they get more of an advantage out of it. But it comes with the machine anyway, so what the heck? It's an extra template. You can't have too many.
This machine is supposed to be able to stitch at 1,200 stitches per minute.
But nobody would ever sew it.
But I think that's where the professional foot comes in, is for people that are a little bit more professional, and so it may have an advantage to somebody that is looking for this sort of feature. But personally, I haven't really used it.
Okay, so it comes with a lot of different.
And then it comes with this. I think this the straight stitching plate.
That's the straight stitch, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't usually use it. I use the zigzag plate for it.
Now, you see, if you're a quilter, you'll use the straight stitch plate a lot. You'll probably use it more than you'll use the zigzag plate. But this machine accommodates for both types of sewing. Okay, so there are a lot of feet with this. Again, this is something that is on a need-to-know basis, is the way I look at it.
There is also features in this machine which I haven't really used much. I've used it a couple of times. Is it will memorize your stitches for you. So, for instance, I happen to know that the 4 is a 1/4 inch button, so I push that and it moves my needle over a 1/4 inch. But they also have something called a scant 1/4 inch that quilters use. And when I was doing a couple of quilts, I set up a stitch on here as a memory so that it would give me a scant 1/4 inch. And I happened to have assigned it to a 0, so I push 0, and it gives me a scant 1/4 inch.
Yeah, and you can program in quite a few of your favorites.
What else you can do is if you have, let's say these letters at the back, right? You have letters that you can think. If I wanted to put on a monogram and do something that's called, and spell out my name, for instance, on a garment or something, and put Walter on it or something like that, I can set it up so that I can program in all the letters together and memorize that into one word and have it sew out the word.
Now, you see, this would be a great advantage to quilters when you want to make a label for your quilt. Then you have it already set up to something that you use repeatedly, and it's just a matter of pushing a couple of buttons and away you go. You don't have to reset it every time. Okay.
Other features this machine has, which I have used a couple of times, it has a hole here and it comes with a knee lifter. And what that does is you can move your knee over on the knee lifter and the foot will automatically go up on it. So, which is good if you're sewing a lot of items where you have to turn a corner. So you go down the row and you knee lift it, turn the corner, and you don't have to use your hands to lift up the presser foot.
Now, you did mention, I think, but we should just mention it again, this does have an automatic thread cutter, which once you have a machine with an automatic thread cutter, you never want a machine without one. It is so convenient. The one thing this machine doesn't have that higher end models come with, and I'll show down here the foot pedal. You can see that the foot pedal is fairly big, which is kind of nice because it keeps it from slipping out from under you a lot. And on some machines, like my machine, the M7, has an extra little pedal that attaches to this, and that's for thread cutting as well. Now, I never use that feature. I prefer using the button on here, but it is that option. And I never use the knee lifter on my M7 either because I find it just, for me, it's awkward. But it does have advantages, as Walter has already explained.
Okay, now what else this machine has is for the presser foot lifter, there's an extra high position for the lifter so that if you have to go under a really thick garment, you can pull up the presser foot higher than a standard machine. So this is normal and this is extra high. So
which is a nice feature.
That's actually a really nice feature because when I'm doing something really bulky, it's nice to be able to lift that foot up a lot higher than it normally goes.
And of course you do have a button that automatically lifts your presser foot up.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? on this one.
No, I don't. You have it on your
I have it on
fancy
mine.
machine.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
That's what happens when you buy an even more expensive machine. You can get a button.
More buzzers and bells, yeah. And I can tell you this, once you've had a machine that has a lot of those buzzers and bells and you're buying a second machine, you don't want to drop down because you'll miss those features, believe me. Okay, so we've talked about the basic features and the feet.
And this also comes with a lot of machines nowadays have a standard top loading bobbin that comes in here so that the bobbin is actually in the top.
Now, if you want to take that plate off, some of the machines, the older machines and the little lesser expensive machines, you have to take the screws out. Do you have to take the screws out?
There's no screws in this plate, so this plate pops out easily.
And how does it do that?
Okay, there's a button on the side here, and I just push it, and the plate pops up, which is really nice feature. So I can just take the plate off for easy cleaning.
And maybe this would be a good time to talk about cleaning.
Yes.
Since that...
and mine probably could use the cleaning right now.
Because now that we've seen that how easy it is to get the foot plate off, cleaning it makes it much easier and something you'll want to do on a more regular basis.
Yes, a lot of people don't seem to clean their machines very often, and it's really important because as soon as it gets a little bit dirty, your machine might start skipping stitches, or you may start getting tangles in your thread, or your thread may start breaking. There's all kinds of different things that can happen, and all you really have to do to fix that is clean your machine.
And the one thing that people don't think about is they think that when they're having a problem with their machine, with some of the ones that Walter's just said, the problems, they don't think, well, I just cleaned it out, there can't be any possibility that this is the problem. Or I cleaned it out last month and I haven't used it that much. Well, you know, you get the tiniest little piece of thread down in there, and if it's in the right spot, it can cause you grief.
Yeah.
So if you re-thread your machine and it's still not operating properly, then open up that foot plate and give it a clean out, because believe me, that can make a lot of difference. Okay, so how do you clean it?
Okay, so the bobbin sits inside what they call a bobbin holder, or a bobbin case in this case. So I take the bobbin out. Oops. I take the bobbin out. That's not supposed to happen, but
well, no, it does happen.
It does happen. Okay, take the bobbin out. In this case, my bobbin case pulled out as well.
But you'll want to take the bobbin case out.
But I take the bobbin case out, and then cleaning it is I clean underneath the bobbin case, and I do have some lint in there.
Yeah, now just before you show us how you clean it, I want people to look in here. There is a center dark hole. You see the dark ring? And in the center of that, there looks like a dark hole. But in that hole, there is a little, it may be white, it will be when you first get your machine. Over time, it'll turn color, but it looks like a piece of fuzz caught in that hole. That's not a piece of fuzz. Don't pull that out. That's the wick, and that's where you oil the machine, which we'll show you in a second. But I have heard horror stories where people thought that was a piece of lint and pulled it out. And if you do that, well, your machine will probably still operate, but it's not going to oil. You won't be able to oil it properly. Now, if by chance you pull that out, and you got to work at it to pull it out. This isn't just something that just drops out. You can get replacement wicks at your dealer, and you can put them in. It's not a big problem to put a new one in, but don't pull it out. And I almost did on this machine when I first got it, because when I was cleaning it the first time, I saw that, and nowhere in the manual did it say don't pull out the wick, or that was the wick. And I thought it was a piece of fuzz. So I thought, well, I need a piece of tweezers to get, or a pair of tweezers to get that out. So I tried, and I started, and I got thinking, no, I have a feeling I shouldn't be pulling that out. I don't think that's fuzz. And yep, luckily I didn't pull it out, because I found out it was not fuzz. It was important. Okay, so you've got the bobbin case. The bobbin case is this piece right here.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very important piece. Now,
this black ring here, it helps the bobbin case stay in because it's actually a magnet.
I did not know that.
And it attaches to the bottom of the bobbin case.
I didn't know that. Well, I learn something new every day. Okay, so that's good. And Yeah, and then of course the bobbin. Okay, so how do you clean it?
Well, I originally went out and bought an expensive brush for this for cleaning this out, but I have since changed my brushes to a cheap dollar store makeup brush because I like it better.
And actually, I use a small, little, soft, cheap paintbrush. The kind you'd use for paint by numbers or something like that.
So I just take my brush in there and I twirl it around and all around the inside here and pick up any lint that comes off
And
on
look,
the
he's got
inside.
quite a bit.
And do it again, clean off my brush, do it again, get all the other, go around the other parts of the inside here and try and brush away as much lint as I can.
Now, do you use canned air? Because there's a lot of controversy about whether one should or one shouldn't. What's your...
Personally, I don't think it's necessarily a great idea to use it just to clean out all of the stuff. But after you've done the brushing and everything, if there's like a really hard piece that you can't seem to get at or something, then I might use some canned air to try and clear it out. Yeah. But actually what else I use is for the insides here, like my machine's not that dirty because I clean it fairly regular, but I've had it where I was doing, if I'm sewing something with a lot of fuzz in it, it tends to collect in there. And like I'm making a bag and I'm using, what do you call it, interfacing, fuzzy interfacing, then it may collect up in here. And if it sometimes gets down in the edges and behind the bobbin case, I have pipe cleaners I shove down there and clean it out.
Okay, so the thing about the canned air, some people tell you it's not a problem. Other people will say because canned air, when you first squeeze the trigger, there'll be moisture that will come out. And that moisture can get caught on the lint and fuzz that's in your machine and make it stick in spots, and that can cause you problems. Now, I do use canned air, but I brush it out really well, like Walter has said, and then just when I finish that, I take the canned air and I do not directly squirt the canned air into this area at the first pull. I put my hand in front of it and feel for the moisture. When after a couple little seconds of pulling on that, there's no more moisture, and I'll give it a couple of quick blasts just down inside to blow it around. But here's your problem, and this is what a lot of people don't do. You do need to have your machine professionally cleaned once a year and a half. It depends on how much you use it. Yes, it's going to cost you money. Where we take it to Ultimate Sewing, it's a minimum charge to have the machine serviced, and that includes cleaning, looking at your timing and adjusting that, fixing your needle threader if it needs to be fixed, whatever needs to be done. A minimum charge is going to be about $100, and you know it's worth every cent of that. And one thing that they do when they clean it is they're able to take off the bottom of the machine and get into the part that you cannot get into, and clean all those little bits of fuzz that drop down in here in this hole. Those pieces of fuzz, you're not getting them all out with that brush because they're going to collect down in here, and that's big hollow spaces, and so that stuff's loose in there, and so they can clean that all out. They suck it out with a vacuum. And that's the other thing you can use. If you have an attachment for your vacuum that's goes down to a very small hose, you can use that. Of course, I have tried different methods with that and with different products I have bought, and I don't find any of them have worked very well with it. You just don't seem to get the suction you need. And you will find online a lot of these little mini vacuum cleaners that they claim will clean sewing machines and appliances and computer keyboards and things like that. They're not worth the money. They just don't have the power or the suction. So the best way to clean your machine is to do what Walter just showed you with a brush. Oh, and one thing about the brush, he bought his brush at the dollar store, and that's fine. But when you're looking at brushes like that, you will want to run them over your hand, twist them with your fingers to see if there's any loose fibers that come out of them. Because some brushes, that's going to make things worse for you in cleaning. If you get the ends of the fibers from the brush in there, well, you're going to have some problems. So check it for stability. Make sure those bristles and everything are well stuck into the handle of the brush that you use. That's why I use a paintbrush, because they're designed to keep their fibers in. Now, not unless you buy a really
what
cheap
kind
one.
of a paintbrush are you using?
Very small, fine one.
Yeah.
That's like for it. And I've used a makeup brush too, and it works fine too, just like Quilter shows. But I do have more expensive ones that you can buy at your dealer.
I bought one for $20 at my dealer, but I personally don't like it as much as my cheap dollar store makeup brush.
You know, really, there isn't. The only advantage with one of those brushes is, like I just said, their bristles will stay in, but not necessarily. As you use it over time, they will wear out as well. So, but make sure you have your machine professionally cleaned at least 1 year, 1.5 years
now,
between.
If you do oil it, I don't really need to oil it today because I did it about a week ago. But I use only sewing machine oil. You can buy this almost anywhere that sells sewing machine equipment. It's a special type of oil that's designed for sewing machines. They tell you not to use like standard, what do you call it, the regular oil.
Don't use regular machine oil. Like the kind of oil you use to grease up your bike chain or whatever.
Don't use that. One of these bottles doesn't cost very much. I think it only costs about $2 or $3 for a bottle like this.
And they last forever.
And you don't go through very much at all. So every once in a while, what I do is I'm not going to do it today, but you put one single drop of oil in that spot.
And the emphasis here is on one single drop. Don't need any more than that. And when you're putting that drop in, it's going onto that wick in that center hole that we've already talked about. If it spills over, because sometimes you're squeezing it and you'll get a little bit more, you'll get a good healthy drop and it'll run over. Use a nice dry cloth. A micro cloth is good. Just wipe it around that whole surface. And that's the other thing when you're cleaning these. Take a dry micro cloth after you've used the brush and everything and just wipe all inside this casing. In here all the way around. You'll be surprised at how dirty, what the blackness that'll come off on that cloth, and that's part of the cleaning. And the sewing machine will come with a little tiny bottle of what they call cleaning solution, and I ran out of that. You just put a couple of drops on your cloth and wipe it around in there, as I was just saying. I asked at my local sewing store and they said just use your machine oil, your sewing machine oil. It's the same stuff. And that's what I use now, so that's good. And don't forget to clean this part.
Yeah, I just did that. I just realized I had a little piece of fuzz in there, and I cleaned it out a second ago too. So.
And underneath.
Yeah.
Clean out all the dust that's there. And yes, you probably won't see a whole lot of dust, and you'll think, well, I don't need to do that. Yes, you do. These machines are extremely sensitive.
Actually, I've got dust all over my pants now.
Yeah, there's what Walter just pulled out of the machine. So yeah, those little parts right there you got on the machine can cause you hell.
And that is just after about a week of sewing.
Yeah. Rule of thumb that I use, because you'll hear this a lot. People say, well, how should I clean my machine? I clean my machine after I have finished any major project. In fact, because I'm quilting on the machine as well, and when you're sewing through batting, you do generate a lot of fuzz. I will sometimes clean my machine halfway through my quilting process as well, just to be sure. And also it depends on the threads you use. Certain threads are fuzzier than other threads.
Yeah, like I've been doing this coat, and I've cleaned the machine twice during the coat, and I haven't gotten very far on the coat so far, because it can't hurt to have to clean a machine.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize it enough. Clean your machine.
The other big thing that people don't seem to do is change their needles often.
Yes, and some people say, well, how do I know when I should change my needle? Well, there's a couple of things. If it breaks, you should change your needle. If your thread keeps breaking, you may need to change your needle. If you hear thunk, thunk, thunk as your needle is going through fabric, it means that your needle is dull. You may need to change your needle. And also, one needle does not do all fabrics. So make sure you know which needle to use, whether it's a sharp or a ballpoint or a jersey or a jeans needle. because it's important. The reason they have different types of needles.
The needles I use a lot are I use for if I'm doing a shirt or a heavy material, I use a jeans needle, right? It has a sharp point on it, so that's good. But then if you're using stretchy fabric like jersey, I use a jersey needle.
And if you're in New Jersey, you need to use a New Jersey
and
needle.
then there's also a third type of needle called a top stitch needle for doing top stitching. However, I actually use the jeans needle a lot for that.
And if you're a quilter, there are actually needles for quilting. They're called quilting needles. If you're doing any embroidery work on your machine with your decorative stitches and things like that, you may want to, depending on the thread you're using, you may want to use an embroidery style needle. But there are needles you can buy that say universal. I don't recommend them because no one needle can handle all sewing jobs. So needles are not expensive, people. If you've spent all this money on a sewing machine, spend some money on your needles. Get a collection of them. They come in packs of 5. They usually run anywhere between $7 to about $11 for a package. A package will last you a long time, but don't cheap out on your needles.
Yeah,
Buy good quality needles. Do not buy the needles that you might find in a dollar store. That is going to, one, they'll break. When a needle breaks, this can be disastrous. One, to your health. Two, it can also jam up your machine and it can damage the part we're showing you right here.
It can damage this.
And it can
if you get a hole through this thing, you pretty much need to get it replaced.
Yeah.
Because you can file it down to sand it down in the spot and might be okay. But what ends up happening is your thread gets caught on it.
There's a groove gets dug into it. It's just plastic.
And you'll be getting thread breaks and all kinds of other things.
And these run on average about $40 a piece. Ask me how I know. I have been through probably 15 of these in this time that I've started sewing. And not because of this machine, but as you know, if you watch the Idiot Quilter on a regular basis, the stories of my 15 times.
However, this is still my original. So
yeah, so Walter hasn't had any problems with it. And I didn't have any problems with it either when I was using this machine. But it had to do with, well, the 15,000 is a special machine. So we're not going to discuss that now.
Well, anyway, so you have to put this back in. There's a little, on this particular machine, there's a little red dot on this bobbin. Some bobbins are yellow dots, some are blue.
Here, take your finger off it. So
this one's got a little red dot on it.
There, see, there's the little red dot.
Okay. And it matches up to a little red dot that's on the inside of the machine.
Get your finger there, right there. You see that?
Okay, and so you have to place it in where the little red dot matches the dot.
I know you can't see this, his hands are in the way, but he needs his hands.
Right, so that's in nice and tight.
And that's the way the play that should be there. If you can spin, oops, my camera slipped down. If you can spin that thing around in there, you don't have it seated properly. Yeah. It has to be seated properly because you do not want to hear the sound your machine is going to make when that's not in there right. And it can throw your timing off, and it can break your needle, and it can cause you a lot of hell.
So then I just put the needle plate back on, and then this one, it's a really nice needle plate. It just snaps back into place.
Which is really nice.
Okay.
The lower end models, most of them, you have to put 2 screws in and take the 2 screws out, and it's a very awkward spot to do that with. So this is a really nice feature of this machine.
Yeah, so then I got to put the bobbin back in, and bobbins have to go in a certain way. They call it the letter P. Okay, where your bobbin thread goes in as if it's a letter P.
Just hold that for a second. You see the thread's coming down. It's coming off the left side of the bobbin, and that's the P. That's what you mean by that. Okay.
Okay. It can't be the other way around, like the letter Q, but it has to be the letter P.
Yeah.
So that goes in here, and there's guides here to bring the thread through the threading of the bobbin properly. So I just take the thread and put it underneath this flange, the flange here.
Yep.
And slide it under, and then there's a thread cutter that that's for this bobbin here. So I slide it around and cut the thread.
And that's all.
And that's all there is to putting a bobbin in.
Because this machine will pull the bobbin thread up automatically for you, so you don't need to worry about that. But you do need to thread it properly. And again, this is where your manual comes in. Don't skip over the part about threading your machine. And speaking of threading your machine, that was the bobbin part, but of course we have
the top part.
So how do we thread this machine?
And so I have to get the end of the thread on this spool. It first goes through this loop here at the top.
Does this machine come with that thread guide?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
The thread guide
stand.
actually
thread stand, which
it
will
flips
fold
down for transporting. It also, this machine also has a built-in handle to it. Okay, and then I go through the first thread guide here. All these instructions are on the top of the machine. It tells you how to thread this machine.
Which is another nice feature of this machine. Your thread, you don't need your manual out. You've got the diagram right here on the top showing you.
And then I go through this guide here. Has an arrow that has it through. Then I go through this guide here. It's labeled number 4.
Okay, so there, number 4.
I guide the thread down through this number 5 here.
Through the channel, this open channel.
Yeah, and
yes, that's important. Your foot needs to be down when threading it. It opens up your
closes your
tension
guide, which is here, Then I go through number 6, and what this is the take-up lever. And if you see, it goes sideways here, Steve. The take-up lever has a little notch in it, right?
Oh, yeah, right there.
Right? You have to make sure your thread goes through that notch. And it's easy to do because as you slide your thread back and you bring it forward, you'll feel a little tug that it goes through there, and you'll know that it's in there. And then you slide it down. You go through guide 7. Which is
guide 7.
This is guide 7.
Okay, the little bar that's right
the little bar. And then what's really important, it has to go through this needle guide at the front of the needle. This one here.
Yep.
And then I thread it through the needle threader. And it has a little V on this needle threader, right? So I just slide it into the V on the needle threader, right? And then I go around the back, and then there's a thread cutter back here, and it cuts the thread for me. So it's in the needle threader here, the thread, right? Mm-hmm. And then I go to, the needle has to be in the center position. I go to thread the needle, and it just slides down and slides through the needle threader and threads the needle, I hope, yes.
And it pulls a loop of the thread through the eye of it, and then you have to pull it the rest of the way through yourself. But
yeah, okay. And then what happens is I have to release the tension on the thread because it's hard to pull right now. I lift up the foot, and it's easier to pull out.
And that's all there is to it. Now, that may have seemed a little bit involved because of the way we were doing it, but once you've done it a few times, it becomes second nature. But make sure you don't miss any of the steps, any of the parts where this thread goes through, because if you do, you're going to have a problem. Your thread's going to get tangled up. You're going to have thread breakage. And if you do have a thread break and you look at it and you see, well, no, my thread is still through my needle, so I don't know what the machine's saying, and you try to carry on sewing, don't. Because 9 times out of 10, you will still have it coming up as a thread break. You need to take the thread right out and rethread it from scratch. Don't take a shortcut. Ask me how I know. Because that's what a lot of people do. They can't be bothered. And it's only a second or two that it takes to rethread your machine. So do it right from scratch. You won't regret that. Okay.
Just a second. I'm not going to do my seam because you won't be able to see the thread.
You are wired to a microphone cord right now, and you're
dragging it over.
Yeah, I'm pulling my camera. Okay. You can tell people we've got professional talent here.
That's not a good piece of fabric.
Okay. So, while Walter's looking all around his room trying to find fabric, which shouldn't be a problem because he has a room full of fabric, what other things can I tell you about this machine? You can lower the feed dogs manually on this machine. In fact, that's how you have to do it. And there's a little switch over here on the side, right here, that lowers and raises your feed dogs. And why that's important, that's for your quilters. If you're doing free motion quilting, you're going to want to drop your feed dogs. Okay,
so I'm just going to do a quick little seam here. It's at 3/8 of an inch right now. And I can just slowly stitch this through.
Now, of course, your machine has variable speeds. Walter's just doing, for sake of demo, a really slow speed.
Now, I want to cut my thread, so I push this button, and it cuts my thread. And there's my seam.
Yep. Now, the one thing this machine doesn't have, which, since I've had higher end machines now that I'm really used to, is once I cut the thread, it automatically lifts the foot. So Walter, you noticed, had to lift the foot manually. On my machine, the M7, when I hit that thread cutting button, it will automatically cut the thread and lift the foot, which you might think's a little thing, but once you've had that feature, you're going to want it. Believe
the only reason I chose that little, I had another piece of fabric here that I need to sew, but and I thought, well, I wanted to do it. I wanted to sew on this little piece because you could see the sewing if I sew on this.
Let's see the
piece
stitches
of blue
on that. Hold that up so we can see how nice that looks. Does a really nice job. Now turn it over at the back. Did you get a bird's nest at the very beginning?
No, not really.
Okay, that's kind of nice. The reason I mention that is, and this goes with any sewing machine, you may, when you first start to sew something, get right at the very beginning a little bird's nest of thread. Usually it's just the thread trying to pick up its tension at that point. If you want to avoid that, put in a leader piece, which is just a little piece of fabric that you run at the beginning. Quilters know this because we're constantly stopping and starting because we're sewing smaller pieces than what you usually do in general garment sewing, and that just avoids that problem. And it's more an aesthetic thing because nobody will probably ever see that, but you know, if you want it to look professional, you don't want that little bird's nest. But that's not a fault of the machine. That's how all machines work.
Well, actually, the bird's nest occurs because it's trying to pick up the bobbin thread.
Yeah. With it.
You can avoid it by picking up the bobbin thread before you...
if you do it manually, you can pick it up, yeah. It's a minor thing. It's not something that is really anything that should deter you from buying
this machine also, like I just showed you with the thing, is the controller is very sensitive. You can adjust your stitch speed completely variable from really, really, really slow to really, really, really fast.
And you can adjust your foot pedal for that too. So when you set
what you do is you set your speed here, right? And no matter how hard you push the foot pedal down,
it's only going to go
to whatever speed you select. So right now I've got it set there. If I set it right there, then I've got the foot pedal all the way down.
He's got his pedal, the pedal to the metal.
Okay. Now if I set it up a little faster, it goes a little faster. And
okay, would you keep your feet in shot?
Okay. If I go up a little faster, it goes a little faster.
And what you probably aren't seeing, because I can't show it very well, is the fact that you can push your pedal down right to the floor and it will only go as fast as you have set it on the controller up here.
Which is actually really nice, because if you want to go slow on something, for a reason just that you want more accurate stitching, then it wouldn't, if your foot slips on the pedal and you press a little harder, you're not all of a sudden zooming through really quick.
Okay, so we have covered most of the major features of this machine. These are the features that Walter uses the most on it, and I've mentioned the ones for quilting as well. But now let's talk about this machine compared to another one that, well, first of all, what's the price on this machine?
Well, I believe I can't tell you right now what the list price is. I think it's $4,000, but I'm not 100% sure. That's Canadian dollars. But most sewing, I've seen it advertised, and I know that the lady that we go to sells it for around $2,500, as far as I know.
Yeah, it depends on the dealer. You can, but usually when you look at it online, when you go to the Janome site, they will quote their price, and their price is the high-end price. The dealers have a certain amount of wiggle room, and they
don't necessarily quote me on this price. That's my best guess. They may sell it for a little more. They may sell it for a little less. I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on that. So, and that's often why you don't see dealers necessarily advertising prices on their machines, because they're restricted by Janome as to what they can do, what they can sell, and at what price they can sell it at. So you need to talk to a dealer about sewing machines.
Yeah, so I wouldn't. I don't want you to go to a Janome dealer and say, "Well, this guy online told me I can get for $2,500." I don't know.
Remember, we're telling you this all from our point of view, from our experience. And our experience was when I bought this machine, it cost me with tax about $3,100 Canadian at the time, and that was about 2.5-3 years ago when I bought it. But
yeah, like if I say like it's $2,500 here, that doesn't include our 13% sales tax on top of that.
So anyways, don't quote us on the prices of these. Whatever, you need to check that out for yourself if you're
with your local dealer. And American prices are completely different than Canadian prices. So.
Okay, so that's the price. Now, you were going to compare this to another model that's comparable.
There's another model on the market, and people will see this, and this one has a silver front to it, right? And this is the 6700P is listed here, right? And there's another model on the market that looks identical to this, right? But this whole silver part is red. It's a red color. Okay.
And that number is?
And that's a 6650. It's a slightly lower machine. And what's different about that one is it has less decorative stitches. This one has about 200. And the 6700 has, I think, around 170 stitches, right? Now what else is it doesn't give you any of the quilting accessories, right? So on the 6700, this is the list of the accessories that you get on there. And everything that's highlighted in yellow, which is probably hard to see on camera, is what's on is included in the 6650. This is a list of accessories that you get with the 6650.
Well, physically you can see that the column for the 6700 accessories is longer than the column for the other machine.
Right. So you get quite a bit less stitches. You don't get the integrated AccuFeed system that I happen to like very much for general sewing as well. And it doesn't have any of the quilting accessories. The quilting feet has no walking feet. A funny, strange thing is it comes with a buttonholer, but it doesn't come with a foot to sew your buttons on. Which I don't quite figure out the logic in that, but...
Now, when we say it doesn't come with those feet, doesn't mean that they're not available, but they're optional accessories. You have to pay separate for them. They don't come in the box with the machine. Now, what's the ballpark difference in price then between the two machines?
I think this one I said sells for $2,500, $2,600, depending on what, right? Depending on the dealer. The other one, the 6650, I think sells for around $1,800 or $1,900.
So there's a considerable difference of about $1,000.
No. You're talking $2,400 or $2,500, $2,500.
And $1,800. Okay, so you're talking $700.
Yeah, about $700. That's a significant amount if you might want a nice machine and all you want to do is some light sewing. But personally, I would like the added features to it.
You get more bang for your buck the more money you spend on these machines.
not everybody has. That's still a lot of money to spend for a sewing machine. So I don't know.
Well, this all goes back to what we said in the first episode was, why do you want a sewing machine? What do you tend to do with it? Now, if you know you're never ever going to quilt, that you're not interested in quilting whatsoever, all you want to do is some light garment sewing. You want to do a blouse, you want to do a skirt, you want to do a shirt, things like that, and other general repairs and things like that, then you could probably get away without any problem and be very happy with the 6650.
Yeah, I went through the manual for both of them, and the manuals are pretty close to being identical. I don't know if there's any difference in the mechanics inside other than the AccuFeed. Now, just because this one has an AccuFeed and the other one doesn't, you can still get a walking foot for the other one.
Yeah, that's why I said you can get the other feet are available. It just costs you a little bit more money. But you may never ever use a walking foot in your sewing experience. So, you're paying for the walking foot if you buy the 6700P. But in my way of looking at things, these machines are an investment. Yes, they're a lot of money. So, you may want to buy a machine that, although it may have features you're not going to use immediately now, you may grow into that. And if you have a machine that has that everything on it, then in the long run, I think you've saved money.
Like, one nice thing about this machine, and it's just an aesthetics thing, but the whole machine, a large portion of the machine is all metal on the outside.
And it's metal on the inside.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And that's important because a lot of the lower end machines, now I don't know about Janome, but on Brothers machines, the machines you pick up at Costco or Walmart, those kind of machines, there's plastic inside.
It's usually the only metal part on those machines are actually where the needle mechanism is, and the rest of it is plastic inside. And whereas these ones, the Janomes, doesn't matter, even supposedly for the cheapest machines, it has a complete metal frame all the way across.
Now, does that make the machine heavy? Yes.
Yes, it
heavier,
does.
But this machine is very portable.
It is heavy. It's a little awkward because it's kind of big. But actually, the other nice thing I really like is the throat size, because when I'm doing a larger project like a bag or something, it's really nice to have that extra space in there.
And I already mentioned that when it comes to quilting. But yes, this machine I used to take to classes with me when I first got it. It's not really a big problem. Now, it is heavy, but it's heavy by, I don't know, what's it weigh, 15 pounds?
No, I think it's about 30.
Is it that much?
I believe it is, yeah.
Well, I didn't think it was that heavy. But anyways...
Oh, no, I lie.
Yeah,
I think it's 25. I think it's 25 pounds.
Oh, okay, I don't think we know. But put it this way, it isn't bad, okay? If you've got a sewing machine carrier bag too, it's even easier. Again, that's something maybe we'll talk about in a future show about carrying bags and things like that, and portability of sewing machines, and which ones are more portable to take to a class and which ones you might want to be more of a permanent fixture on your sewing table. Okay, any parting thoughts about this?
Actually, there's this machine has a lot of advantages. I really like using it. The only negative thing that I can think about is that the thing that shows you all your stitches on it is the chart isn't integrated like some of the machines have it on a flip up panel or something like that. That's the only thing I can say that I don't like about it. But I love this machine. It has nice lighting in it. It has everything. It works well.
And the price was right for Walter.
It works well, and it will sew through very thick material, because I've made these bags on it, and these bags have like multiple layers of fabric and interfacing on these bags, and the seams can get really thick, and I've had no problem sewing them.
And by the way, this sewing machine did not do this on the front of it. That's an embroidery machine.
That's my embroidery machine.
Which we will talk about embroidery machines on another episode. But Walter didn't get the joke when I said in this machine the price was right for him.
Yeah, well, I got it.
Custom for nothing. He inherited from me. So, okay, I'm going to turn the camera back around on us for just parting comments. Okay, so that's the second episode of So Chatty, and we hope that you got some useful information for yourself out of this. Do remember that So Chatty is pretty much geared towards people who are novices in sewing or just beginners, and we are not experts, so everything we have said today is stuff that we have learned from our experience. It isn't necessarily 100% accurate. That doesn't mean we're telling you lies or making things up. We are not sponsored by anybody. We do not sell Janome machines or anything like that. Your foot is on the microphone cord. Thank you very much. So we're just speaking from our experience with the machine and hope you get a lot out of it. Now, if you have any specific questions that you would like us to deal with on future episodes, please put them in the comments below.
If you have any, I'll check the messages later, and if somebody have any comments or questions or something like that, I'm happy to answer anything I can tell you.
We'll compile a list of those things and either add them as topics in future episodes of So Chatty, or we may even do one episode where we'll handle nothing but questions and answers. And of course, if we don't have the answer, well, sorry, we don't have the answer, and we will not BS you about it. We'll tell you up front if we don't know about that. Because, I mean, I learned something new today. I didn't know that little black ring was magnetic. Go figure. So there's always things you can learn about sewing machines and anything. Any parting comments, Walter?
No.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us for this issue of So Chatty, and we'll see you in the next episode. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at a higher-end machine, and that's the Continental M7, and possibly throw in the Skyline S7 as well. Or that may be a separate one as well. We have a lot of machines. Yeah. Okay. Have a good day. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.